Views and opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily the views of this station, its management, sponsors, or other hosts. If you have any comments or suggestions about this program, please contact us at radio@usaebn.org. That's radio@usaebn.org.
Welcome to the Zeta Report here on USA Emergency Broadcasting Network. We are live first Mondays of every month. My name is Andre. I'm with USA EBN, and I'm joined every first Monday by Nancy Leader from ZetaTalk.com. Nancy, are you there?
I sure am. I'm all excited to bring the show today because we have so many things that are exacerbating around the world. Volcanoes are going off in record numbers, even extinct volcanoes. Earthquakes are, just whoops, the rise, the uptick is. So I decided to do a worst-case solutions hour. And what this is addressing is, let's say you get caught in a tornado or whatever. What do? What's the one thing you should remember and bear in mind? Because you can carry a lot of advice and have a lot of thoughts, but, what is the one thing you should bear in mind? And that's what I hope to get to here, to make a note so that in a worst-case scenario, you will have a worst-case solution. But before we get into that, let us read the standard disclaimer. In partnership with USA EBN, Zeta Talk and the Zeta Report will be discussing the challenges of living on a planet beset with change, rising seas, increasing earthquakes and volcanic activity, weather gone wild, and the worry of what to do in a worst-case scenario. We will also inject Zeta Talk prophecy on what is coming next and advice on readiness plans and safe locations. Whenever Zeta Talk is quoted, please remember that prophecy is not fact. It is opinion. It only becomes fact when it happens. The Zetas are remarkably accurate but have been wrong on occasion. Bear that in mind. For more information on this subject, please visit ZetaTalk.com or the Zeta Report on YouTube. What to do if in a worst-case scenario, an earthquake, volcanic eruption, tornado. Earthquakes are on the uptick, though the statistics downplay the extent of this. There's a lot of advice on what to do if a quake starts shaking the house, like standing in a doorway or ducking under a heavy table or desk. But the very best safety is not to be in a building at all, and certainly not to be near any stucco or brick building. Wood frame structures bend and sway, where stucco and brick snap and fall. Even steel frame high-rises have some safety, as they likewise will bend and sway. Puerto Rico is being hammered lately, and presuming that these magnitude 4 and 5 quakes are dumbed down, no wonder their cities are turning into rubble. They're living in the streets, which is perhaps the safest place for them at present. I have the book Peace of Mind in Earthquake Country, written for and by California folk, which I found immensely educational. A building which is braced to prevent a separation of the house from the basement, for instance, will not flop on its side. Quoting a book review, having investigated more than 100 earthquakes around the world, demystify the confusing technical aspects of earthquakes and present a do-it-yourself approach to home and business preparedness. Here they explain in accessible text earthquake-related concepts and how to inexpensively strengthen your home or office. I highly recommend it. One of the best safety tips to take is to be alerted to an earthquake days ahead. There are 2 solid clues I am aware of. First, that pets or domestic animals will become frantic and try to flee. The Chinese use their Peking ducks for this, and I can confirm that my duck Mildred became frantic for the 2 days ahead of a 4.5 quake in nearby Chicago. Quake happened, Mildred was calm again, just like that. Second clue, that radio reception has a lot of static. This clue also happens about 2 days ahead of the quake. This second clue was confirmed to me when I moved to California in 1898, just after the magnitude 7.9 Loma Prieta quake. People reported that they drove past the epicenter the 2 days before the quake and had lousy reception, full of static. Now, best safety tip for a pending quake? Keep the kitchen radio on in the background and don't hesitate to live outside in a tent for a few days and nights if it's full of static. This is presuming you can't keep a Peking duck and don't have pets that are running away from home like crazy. That's another clue. They get very anxious. They pant, and you open the door, whoosh, they're gone. You know, what's the problem? Well, their instincts are telling them to flee, flee. So they are a good advocate. Okay, tsunamis can happen when a quake happens on a plate border or fault line just offshore. One of the sides drops or rises. There's a difference in elevation and underwater plates. The water pours into the void and rebounds. The worst tsunami in memory was the 2004 Aceh tsunami, which killed an estimated 23,000 people. The elephants somehow knew, racing for the hills, but humans ignored these instinctive messages and stayed on the beach to drown. Oh, look, there's a big wave coming. Quoting History.com, a 9.1 magnitude earthquake, one of the largest ever recorded, ripped through an undersea fault in the Indian Ocean, propelling a massive column of water toward unsuspecting shores. The Boxing Day tsunami would be the deadliest in recorded history. The city of Banda Aceh on the northern tip of Sumatra was closest to the powerful earthquake's epicenter, and the first waves arrived in just 20 minutes. It's nearly impossible to imagine the 100-foot roiling mountain of water that engulfed the coastal city. Buildings folded like houses of cards. Trees and cars were swept up in the oil-black rapids, and virtually no one caught in the deluge survived. End of the quote. Best safety tip for tsunami? Head for the hills if a quake happens along a coastline, or if the water pulls away from the coast. By the way, this is standard fare for tsunami. You're on the beach, and for some reason the water pulls away, and the beach is so much broader. Why did the water pull away? Hey, go follow those elephants up into the hills. I love those stories from Aceh, where they had children on little elephants, you know, getting a ride, and those elephants just headed for the hill, taking the kids with them, and they were survivors because of that. Tornadoes occur because air masses, hot and cold, layer above such that dense cold air wants to drop suddenly through the less dense hot air. As with anything on Earth moving rapidly downward, a swirl develops because the globe is turning on its axis. Tornadoes will often develop in clusters dancing across the landscape. Clues that the weather is likely to spawn tornadoes are continuous lightning and the appearance of clouds moving in different directions overhead, crisscross from each other. The lightning develops due to friction between the air masses, the same concept in place during the thunderstorm lightnings. There is often an eerie yellow tinge to the sky, and the sound a tornado makes is akin to a freight train, a roar. Tornadoes stay above ground, so being below ground in the shelter is a defense. Tornadoes are on record going up and over a concrete dome, and certainly do this for hills. Thus, being between hills is also a defense, as I can attest. I live between hills, and stood on the porch while a tornado roared overhead, but did not strike the homes here. It went to the north of us, down the Wisconsin River above the Dells. It went to the south of us, down near Spring Green, ripped through those areas, and we didn't have nada, and never have. Quoting the monolithic dome, wind speed of 300 miles per hour is considered maximum for a tornado. It is far greater than that of a hurricane. Against that much pressure, a monolithic dome, 100 feet in diameter, 35 feet tall, would still have a safety margin nearly 1.5 times its minimum design strength. A hurricane doesn't exert enough pressure on the dome to even be noticed. This is of record. People said, "What was that thump?" And after it was all over, they went out and found that a tornado went right overhead, clank, everything, the pathway this way and that way, nada on the dome. If you don't have protection in a dome or from nearby hills, seek shelter underground in a storm shelter or in an interior closet or room without windows. The difference in air pressure can explode windows outward or inward, but I think mostly they go outward. The classic storm shelter in use in Kansas just below the surface and with strong windproof door works well. If caught on the road, lay down in a roadside trench as the car itself may lift and be thrown. The key is to be below ground and away from projectiles. I think going under one of those, where they let the water flow from one side of the road to the next, you can crawl into one of those if you don't have a deep trench roadside, and that has the same effect, being underground. Best safety tip if caught in a tornado? Be below ground. And I would think if your visibility isn't that good, you could listen for that roaring train. That's exactly what it sounded like. We have train tracks near our house here, and I know what those freight trains sound like. That's what it was. This past month, the Taal volcano, just 35 miles south of Manila, suddenly exploded. Taal and Manila lie on the edge of the Philippine plate, which is tilting as the Zeta predicted plate movements proceed. Taal gave no warning, quoting News.org. Thousands of people were evacuated from the area near Taal volcano after it suddenly shot a column of ash and steam as high as 9 miles into the sky. Lightning crackled inside the smoke and tremors shook the ground. Taal has erupted most recently in 1977. It's not that it's not an erupting volcano. It's that it gave no warning, none, nada. The fact that volcanoes are erupting at an almost exponential pace is indisputable. Volcanoes are awakening. Extinct volcanoes, those not active in over 10,000 years, are also activating. Examples are the Sotara volcano in Colombia and several extinct volcanoes in California, such as the Cosco volcanic field in the Mojave Desert. Quoting endoftheamericandream.com. Why are volcanoes all over the globe suddenly shooting giant clouds of ash miles into the air? A massive eruption in the Philippines is making headlines all over the world, but what most people don't realize is that several other volcanoes have also blown their tops in spectacular fashion within the past week. Suddenly, volcanoes all over the globe are shooting giant clouds of ash miles into the air, and this is greatly puzzling many of the experts. End of the quote. Well, they don't read Zeta Talk, I guess, or they would know about the plate movements predicted in 2010 and rolling out ever since in a very well established and provable manner. These erupting volcanoes show that all plates are now moving. The quakes hammering Puerto Rico and the huge quake near Cuba that just ruptured just days ago show that the Caribbean plate is being pushed westward as the Zetas predicted. An eruption at White Island in New Zealand was so sudden that tourists were caught by surprise and died on the spot. They were walking around the darn island. These plate movements are all occurring simultaneously. In the opinion of the Zetas, this shows that their predicted plate movements are at an end stage and will all be in the dance at the same time as though they're in a hurry. That said, what are the dangers that volcanoes present, and how can those living near them best protect themselves? Oh, there's some good tips here. Volcanic ash rises miles in the sky, is blown about by the wind, and causes lots of problems where it finally lands to the ground. Plumes rise so high in the sky that airliners avoid the area as the ash can clog jet engines. Quoting Reuters on January 3, 2020, rumbling Alaska volcano sends ash plume 5 miles into the air. The ash burst from Shishkala volcano about 670 miles southwest of Anchorage, drifted over the sea at least 70 miles southeast of the volcano. Air traffic was advised to steer clear of Shishkala. End of the quote. What does not go up rolls along the ground, a mixture of hot gases and fine ash called the pyroclastic flow. This is deadly for several reasons. It is super hot, melting metal and burning everything in its path. It moves down the sides of the volcano at high speed, so cannot be outrun. Quoting the geography site, pyroclastic flows are clouds of hot volcanic gases, ash and volcanic bombs that can sweep down the volcano's sides and other steep hills at speeds of over 100 miles per hour. A pyroclastic has an added killer element, poisonous gases, at temperatures hot enough to burn your lungs away. End of the quote. Oh, sounds lovely. The excavation of Pompeii revealed that it was not hot lava or hot rocks that killed the populace. It was those poisonous gases. The bodies are intact. Quoting geography site again. In AD 79, Vesuvius erupted in Italy. The pyroclastic flow hit the town of Pompeii, damaging walls of buildings, ripping roofs off, and killing all living things in its path. About 2,000 bodies have been found in the excavation, and most seem to have died from choking on poisonous hot gases. End of the quote. A more recent example of what a pyroclastic flow can do is Mount St. Helens in 1980. This was an eruption that gave little warning. The pyroclastic flow happened within a minute. A forest was flattened. Observers on the mountain were, of course, killed outright. St. Helens is about 55 miles northeast of Portland, Oregon, and 95 miles south of Seattle, but these cities escaped unharmed. Quoting geography site again. The initial eruption of Mount St. Helens included a pyroclastic flow that swept down the mountain, flattening forests, overtaking escaping vehicles, and killing several people who stood absolutely no chance of moving out of its path. These ash clouds at 500 degrees centigrade burnt everything in their path. End of the quote. The ash is heavy enough to collapse roofs and does not simply melt or wash away, but can clog cars and air conditioners, any man-made device, outside in the open air. It can result in lahar, or wet ash landslides, that occur long after an eruption. This is not a lava flow, which is a flow of molten lava from the volcano. A lahar is wet ash. Both hot and wet ash eventually form into a type of concrete and become volcanic rock. Volcanic ash has poisonous chemicals like fluoride. Following a 1995 eruption of Ruapehu in New Zealand, cows and sheep dropped dead after grazing fields contaminated by ash. It was the fluoride that killed them. Quoting ResearchGate.net. Environmental hazards of fluoride in volcanic ash. A case study from Ruapehu, New Zealand, in large proportion to the total fluoride in the ash, is apparently soluble in the digestive system of grazing animals. In the Ruapehu case, this led to several thousand sheep dead from fluoride. Quoting volcanoexperience.com. Ash from volcanoes in different parts of the world contain different chemical elements. Fluoride is the most toxic to plants and animals and is in many volcanic eruptions. It attaches to the ash and travels with the wind to the farmlands around the volcano. It is also known that if livestock eat the grass covered with ash, they get gastrointestinal blockages and die. Even a small layer of ash on the grass can be toxic to sheep and cattle that eat it. End of the quote. And if hot lava and poisonous gases aren't enough to keep you at a distance from volcanoes, the long-term effect of breathing the fine ash should. It turns to concrete in the lungs. How far away is a safe distance? In the opinion of the Zetas, 100 miles. Being upwind is preferable to being downwind. But if you cannot be that distance, or at least have a protective mask or scarf for airflow, quoting National Geographic, basically you should have a protective mask or scarf for safe airflow. Volcanic ash can cause eye, nose, and lung irritation, as well as breathing problems. It is really what a horrifying thought that you breathe the ash in, and the next thing you know, I mean, what do they do about concrete in the lungs? Kiss you goodbye. Wow. And yet, that's all it takes is a scarf or a mask and keep the ash out of your lungs. Best safety tip, if near an exploding volcano, have that face mask handy and run like hell. Now, what about all the fires over in Australia? Another item in the news this past month has been the raging fires there, which seem to be engulfing half the country. Yes, they've had a drought, but for the very accurate Zetas, there is more to this picture. They are also experiencing hot Earth. In the opinion of the Zetas, the rise of the Indo-Australian plate on the eastern edge forms a void under the Australian landmass, where hot magma is rushing into that void. Thus, the heat of the fire that's melting metal. The Earth just gets hot. It should be noted that the wildfires in Australia are not burning above the huge Australian aquifer, which is situated centrally in the eastern half of Australia. It's a huge aquifer. It takes up half the eastern part of Australia in the center there. There's no fire there. None. Right? This buffers the surface from the hot lava below. Why else is that part of the continent spared? It's just as dry and just as hot. There you go. In the opinion of the Zetas, as I like to say, Zetas right again. All right, this happened in California, too, during recent wildfires. In the opinion of the Zetas, this was caused by plate subduction under California, with the Juan de Fuca or Pacific plates pushing under the North American plate. Quoting Zeta Talk, we have described hot Earth as being a danger during the hour of the pole shift. This is due to friction from rapidly shifting rock layers found along the plate borders or fault lines. The heat of friction was reported by both West Coast Indians and in the annals of those in the eastern Mediterranean during prior pole shifts. The ground seemed to become as soft as wax or molten metal. Thus, where the ancients reported hot Earth during prior pole shifts, we have extremely hot fires springing up from the ground, where there is plate subduction, etc., or that type of thing. End of the quote from Zeta Talk, by the way. In recorded history, the American Indians reported hot Earth literally melting under their feet, so they had to jump into streams to escape, but found the water in the streams boiling. Quoting Vekikovsky, the traditions of the Indians retain the memory of this boiling of water in river and sea. The tribes of British Columbia tell great clouds appeared, and with such a great heat came that finally the water boiled. People jumped into the streams and lakes to cool themselves and died. On the North Pacific coast of America, the tribes insist that the ocean boiled. It grew very hot. Many animals jumped into the water to save themselves, but the water began to boil. The Indians of the southern Ute tribe in Colorado record in their legends that the rivers boiled. End of the quote from Vekikovsky. Seems not just one source, not just one person. Pretty good sampling. Vekikovsky is fascinating reading. You want the right book to buy? Earth in Upheaval, where he gives all the details of the earth changes. None of this mythology stuff, right down to the nitty-gritty. What should one do if faced by such a situation? But per the Zetas, go to the hilltops, not the river bottoms, as the crust of the earth will be thicker there. Quoting Zeta Talk, those situated where rapid seduction occurs on areas above sea level may find themselves on hot earth. Here height helps, as the greater the distance from where friction between the crusts is creating heat, the better. Enter the quote from the Zetas. Best safety tip for hot earth? Be on high ground and jump in the pool, not the river in the low ground, but in a pool up there on the hilltop. I've seen that too on people that are caught in a rush of fire that's roaring along, and they have a swimming pool, and they go in that swimming pool, just they don't even need the little straw, just the fact that they're in the water. The flames are not going to come dancing on the water, and saved many a life.
Yeah, I saw a lot of folks, some reports of folks out in Australia on the coast there when the fires got really bad and were spreading quickly. They were seeking shelter in the surf of the ocean, which is fine for a while, but then what if the fire doesn't go away? Then you're
standing in the ocean.
Stuck standing in the ocean. But some of the California fires, folks up, people that have a little bit of extra money that are up in the hills there had a lot of swimming pools. So that is an option. Aren't there fire shelters too? The concrete fire shelters that some people have, they're a lot like a storm shelter, but they're built for fires.
Yeah, that would work because the concrete does not burn and it doesn't heat up either.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good thought. Yes. Well, I hope you remember the tips, guys, because this is like bottom line. What do you do? If you're caught in this situation, what do you need to remember? Lightning is another one. If there's a lot of lightning strikes, they don't stand under a flagpole because it goes down the metal. They say if you sit in a car and has all 4 rubber wheels on the ground, it's less likely to strike the car because it's looking to ground, which is why they advise you don't be near the plumbing of a house. Like, don't go take a shower during a lightning storm because it'll come down the pipes potentially and jump right on you, or be in a boat. That's another thing.
Because with the sailboats, especially with the mast, usually made out of metal or But another thing to be said with that too is a lot of people say, well, in a storm, a thunderstorm or whatever, you just get under the biggest tree you can find. Well, the biggest tree you can find is also the biggest antenna for grounding.
That's right.
So think about that too.
Yeah. Don't be the one thing standing in the center of the field that is the tallest thing around. But likewise, don't be under the tallest thing around. Yeah.
Holding your golf club over your head.
Oh, yeah.
Look at me. Yeah. On a more serious note, though, we can, the viewers and listeners out there, this will be on YouTube as well as on the Blog Talk Radio site, but for those of you looking for preparedness information or readiness, you can check out our website for USAEBN. That's USAEBN.org. You can look up earthquakes, tornadoes, floods, hurricanes, and even flu preparedness, with the coronavirus and things of that nature happening out there, and that's cyclical as well. But wash your hands is the biggest thing always that we teach as far as, basic sanitation. But also on the Zeta Talk website, so you can look up tracking earthquakes there, and as well as the up-to-date information on poleshift.ning.com.
Right.
But it's always about your location. It's like, look around. If you're near, you're near a volcano, or what's in California, most of California is either an earthquake zone or a volcano zone or some sort of leftover of that. You know where you are. High ground is always the best.
Yes, exactly. And people can't often do much about where they live. They get ensconced. Their extended family is there. Their job is there, etc., etc. I know volcanic rock is usually very rich, which is why agriculture clusters around volcanoes, because after the volcanic rock breaks down, well, there you have nutrients for plants and the like. So, it's difficult, but I think if you can at least not breathe in the crap, and have a mask, that's a major step. Wanted to touch base on. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say a little thing about the masks, real quick, with dust from volcanic activity, sandstorm, smoke. You can use a regular dust filter mask, something that covers your mouth and nose, and then something for your eyes too, because you're going to have that sulfuric acid, sulfur dioxide are also coming out of volcanic eruptions, and that creates, when that touches water, that turns into acid rain. But you also have water. I mean, your membrane of your eye is water, and that's going to turn to acid when it hits your eye. So also think about eye protection. And with the flu, too. I mean, eye protection, just bundle up.
Yeah, they say that if people are sneezing and coughing and the stuff lands on your eyeball, there you go. It's very contagious, but it'll settle down, because SARS did, and all these others, they settled down. Remember when we had the Ebola scare? Oh, it was terrible. It was, and it was like, flights in from Africa, and they were seeking a vaccine, which I think they finally got one. It works. Yeah. So that settled down.
Made in a lab, but side note, made in a lab. You were going to say something about New Madrid, though. We've had some activity in the Central United States.
I just wanted to point out something interesting. You can see how tight the plate, the North American plate, is locked down. Listen to this synchronicity of dates. As we said, the New Madrid rips because North American plate cannot roll. It's a flat top. It goes all the way from Kamchatka all the way across the Arctic to Iceland as a straight line, and it cannot roll, and therefore as the Atlantic widens and the Pacific compresses, it gets pulled into a taut bow shape, and then finally rips with this diagonal up along the New Madrid, because it's the only thing it can do. Okay, there's bow tension there from the Aleutian Islands to the tip of Mexico, and we see a lot of quakes down at the tip of Mexico and up at the top in the Aleutians. On January 13th, this bow tension was so intense that it caused a spreading of the seaway, a quake at Toronto, 4 something, which of course it wasn't a 4 because they're always dumbed down by at least, I don't know how many magnitude levels, but a quake in Toronto, and same day, a big water main broke in New York City. Okay. So then, but what was eerie was the quakes that had been occurring in the little New Madrid region had been going like every day. There was, for months, several months. It was like every day, beep boop up boop boop up, right there, right around the New Madrid region, and all of a sudden they stopped on that point, Then on January 19th, we had an unusual 4.5 in the western Kansas, at South Hutchinson, Kansas. And at the same time, over there in Knoxville, a series of quakes started 3 days in a row, 2.8, 3.8, etc., to the right and to the left, or to the east and the west of the New Madrid spot, as though it was like looking for places where it could adjust. The New Madrid region could not, it was jammed. It had no wiggle room anymore. So that was the 19th. So 13th was the Toronto and the blah, blah, and the quake stopped.
Okay.
On the 19th, we had to the right and to the left over there, right? You could see that the plate was jammed. Then, on on January 24th, the quake started again in New Madrid, but guess what happened on January 24th? We had something down at the Gulf. Boom! A big thing happened in Mississippi where they heard booms, and nobody knew it was not lightning, it was not, they go through the litany of what it wasn't, right? Well, it's snapping rock. And they heard it over a broad stretch from Gulfport to all the way over to Mobile, through Pensacola, a broad swath, and then over to the west at Houston, boom, on the same day, on the 24th, we had another factory explode. Big one, boom, shattered windows and heard for miles and all this. And nobody can ever explain what causes these, because the zone, fault zone moves, pulls fittings apart, which allows, these factories always work with some sort of flammable something to ignite. Okay, now if you look at a map of the San Andreas Fault, it goes down to the Gulf there, where it empties into the Gulf, and to the right it branches over along the Gulf and goes up the East Coast, and it's called the East Coast Fault Line. Well, right at the same place, it branches to the west and goes through Texas, and it's like a branch, and that it followed that branch on January 24th. So what we have is plate lock under so much tension, that it has no wiggle room at the New Madrid. Now we're back to having a small quake there, not every day, once every 4 or 5 days, but we're still under extreme tension in the North American plate. And there's only one thing that's going to relieve that, and that is the big boom-bah. And when the big boom-bah happens, you're going to have bridges separate up and down the Mississippi. There's a point at New Madrid where the soft rock molds into hard rock. There's a softer sedentary rock that wraps all the way up there and comes to a point along the Mississippi, and then above that point and at New Madrid, it's hard rock on either side of the Mississippi. The problem with this is that soft rock can stretch and adjust and wiggle and boom or whatever, but once you get to hard rock, when that starts moving, it is a big whammo, and I feel that it will surely mean a series of breaks. It's like a dam breaking. The dam up on top breaks and the water rolls, and then the next dam down can't hold it and it breaks, and then the next dam can't hold it and breaks. Won't we have that going from New Madrid up toward Chicago and all along the fault line, which rolls under the seaway all the way to the East Coast, or the New England region, I should say. So that's what. And we'll probably not have a heck of a lot of warning once again.
Well, I mean, that's what we're here for. I mean, we're talking about it. A lot of people are talking about the Midwest quakes, but
yes.
we've after 5 years of New Madrid activity, the normal everyday Joe public is probably not listening anymore. Just like people in California still live in California. So it means
right.
You roll the dice, and the more information that you have, is the better you can make better decisions about your preparedness. But one thing you can do is kind of look at a topographical map of your region, or look at a topographical map of the central United States, and you see where the rivers are and how the Mississippi flows, and how Illinois kind of comes to a point, like you said, like almost like a triangular point. That's the different types of rock that we're talking about, and you can kind of see where the the river valleys, the Ohio River Valley, the Missouri, and the Mississippi, how they all come together down towards New Madrid there, and all the curve of there's still a curve in the Mississippi. Well, that's the last one, when there wasn't a media and there wasn't a lot of people living in the area when it happened, so it wasn't. I mean, it was well publicized because it was a several-week event, and the Zetas have talked about that as well, where it's going to be one big one and followed by many other ones, like you said, going up the chain, like breaking ice. It's got to rip. So
yes. Once it starts to give, Each of these points must be strong enough to hold it, and they won't be. They won't be strong enough to hold once it starts to give. So that New Madrid spot I'm talking about where soft rock becomes hard rock, that's where the river ran backward. That's where the Real Foot Lake, was formed because the Mississippi roiled and heaved and went in so many different directions. That's the big break. And I have heard people, from the region have said that their houses are shuddering and shaking all the time. They know. So I don't know if it would do any good to have your AM radio tuned in the kitchen and listen
this
to
isn't from
static.
fracking quakes or whatever the conspiracy theory is there, but this is the Earth moving, and there's tension.
Yep. If your kitchen radio is nothing but static, of course right now it's the middle of winter, but sleep outside in a tent. Why not?
The animals
love
will
to
let
camp, you know. We're going to have a cookout again, kids. Now dash in the house and get your teddy bear and come right back.
It's a good opportunity to test out your emergency supplies, and then you have your NOAA weather radio, your hand crank radio that you don't need batteries for, and you can check out make up your tent and your water filtration and distillation and all that good stuff.
That's right.
The kids would be like, my iPhone doesn't work. I can't play TikTok games or whatever the kids are doing. I don't know.
Well, can't you get an extension cord for some of this stuff? If the house falls and it squashes your extension cord.
If the power's out, I'm not sure what the extension cord's going to do. First thing you should do after the S hits the fan is fire up your generator so everybody in the neighborhood knows where to go and steal a generator. It's your house.
Yeah.
Like after Christmas, the big TV boxes are out in the front porch. It's like, well, I'm going to go to that house and get myself a new TV.
Yeah. It's always a problem. You have to keep peace with your neighbors and teamwork of some sort. Make a big list of everything that needs to be done and parse it out and make it a game. All right, kids go do this and you kids go do that and see who gets back here first with their goods. That kind of thing, I guess. I don't know. Make a game out of it.
At the end of the day, all you got is each other. So,
That's right. Yes.
You, your family, if you're up at Uncle Bob's or whatever, at your location, or if you're stuck in the city. If you're stuck in the city, you've got, you're going to have to rely on some neighborhood service to other kind of let everybody kind of help each other, because the other way is not so nice.
Yeah. Well, and it doesn't work. The problem with being just selfish is that you really don't survive as well as if you have a big team and are a part of a big team, and everybody's chipping in.
That's why nobody's going to dig out the rich from their bunkers, because we'll be too busy helping each other. It's like, oh, you had all that money in those, in those underground bunkers. Have fun down there. We'll be up here, rebuilding society.
Well, the rich will think that they can buy services and buy food and buy. I have all this money, but the money's not worth anything. Can you eat it?
Bodyguards are going to go home.
That's right. Go their own way.
And
that's right.
We'll be fine though, because people will be ready, because they'll be listening to us, and they'll have their survival supplies, and they'll have their seeds, and they'll have their masks, and they won't be worried about.
And know what to do.
Sure.
Yes. Build houseboats and eat lysine-rich weeds. Really, this works. It sounds like a lot of fun to me, frankly. I would love to live on a houseboat, if only I was a bit younger. Because it sounds so romantic, and be on the water and be swayed to sleep every night in the waves. Be able to fish and hear the birds. I just think that sounds wonderful.